Okay, what am I doing in this top room? Kayaknya gue salah room juga. But anyway, happy to be here. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. When I was a kid, I cannot afford stuffs because I was poor. When I was a kid, I cannot afford the one Power Ranger robot that I really want because my parents will not be able to give me that. When I was a kid, I do not know what kind of life growing up looks like because all I know is pain. Then, when everyone said, "Oh, childhood is the best part of your life because you don't have to think about anything. Childhood is the best part of your life because when you grow up, you will feel more pain that is more valid, that is more tangible, that is way beyond what you can think of as a child." I don't understand because throughout my childhood, what I see is pain. What I see is miserable lives, seeing lots of stuffs. Basically, I'm not raised in a well-raised family as well. They are not harmonious either. That said, the question then becomes, what kind of narratives that are we pursuing such that society believes in a world where there is a timeline on your life. There is a timeline in which before 18 you will be happy. It will be the happiest moment of your life. You will enjoy every part of it. But then suddenly after 18, it's okay if we put you into hardships. It's okay if we put you into pain. It's okay if we put you into sufferings because that is part of growing up. That is part of your living your childhood. We say we are tired. We said it's enough. We don't like pain to be justified. We don't like any hurtful. We do not narrative is parting up, is part of becoming adult, is part of living your childhood, is part of this and that. We say a human that is not choosing to be born in certain ways deserve to feel happy. That is part of any human experiences. I think in a weird Marcel, you do not feel you cannot happiness. Surprise.
Keep on going aja, Kang.
Okay, restarting. I think I only missed 2 minutes. 20 seconds. But restarting in 3, 2, 1. But I think to some extent, we reject the notion that there should be a timeline at all, because at that moment you have, for example, there is, there is a timeline that say, oh, you have to move on beyond your happy times. You don't have to, don't get to feel happy. You don't get to enjoy your favorite show. You don't get to enjoy your friend's companion, your family's companion. You have to leave your family, for example, when you're 18. That's stupid. You don't have to move from that, right? You don't have to move from happiness to be a functioning adult member of the society. That is something that we reject. That is something that we oppose. And I think that is fair for us to say that growing up should not be a painful experience. Growing up only means that, oh, you suddenly move from someone that have to be catered by the society, by the school and everything, and becoming a functioning adult that have to choose for themselves. That's it, full stop. There is no way in the terms and conditions of becoming adult that says you have to be painful, is it? Even if you, that's not, we also oppose the narrative that you cannot be happy throughout your adulthood, because there's plenty of prevalent narrative that when you're adult everything is miserable for you. At the very least, nothing is happy. At the very least, you're bored with life, bored with your corporate life. There's no passion, there's no feel of happiness, there's no feel of content. We reject the notion as well because we believe a, a standardized narrative that fits all shouldn't apply to everyone. Everyone who starts rediscovering their life, who starts thinking their position in life. I'll take you after this, Elgard. Start repositioning their life to actually say, hey, I deserve to be happy regardless. Hey, I don't deserve such treatment. Which comes to my second point. This justifies the pain and gaslights lots of people into a position where they think, oh, painful is part of lifestyle and such. What am I talking about? This justifies a government position in which economic hardships for all young adults are justified, such as, oh, it's okay, it's indeed hard for you to buy a house. Surprisingly, my grandma back then perhaps does not have the same hardships to buy a house because the housing markets are not as effed up as it used to be back then, for example. For example, it justifies to a certain extent your seniors bullying you during your orientation week and say, oh, this is part of you growing up and preparing you for the society. Sure, we hate that practice, but the manifestation of that practice is rampant, is prevalent, is society is putting the idea that you have to feel pain to grow adult. This also looks like in lots of movies that portrays people growing up through pains, through sufferings, and so on and so forth. We say enough is enough. We do not want people to feel like their pain is justified. They have to resist. They have to say, I don't deserve this, and we do not want society to gaslight it. Elgard.
With that logic, wouldn't you say that it invalidates individuals who do experience pain when they move from one stage to another because you say that your experience shouldn't exist?
Okay, so here's the thing, right? There's difference between invalidating than invalidating and actually resisting. What does this mean? This leads to my third point very beautifully. This talks about how people should not focus on the pain and focus on actually creating betterments in life. Sure, we agree invalidating whatever it is that you're going through is important, but eventually individuals have to move on beyond that. In order for you to be a functional human being, for example, in order for you to be able to function properly pre suffering, basically, these narratives to certain extent justifies to certain extent puts a narrative that it's okay for you to feel painful. We say it's not okay, but is it invalidating? No, we say the pain, the suffering exists. Yes, there is, but it shouldn't be. Nobody should suffer that way. That is the moment I think it's fair for you to say, hey, you have to go beyond that pain. You have to go beyond, hey, we don't deserve this pain nevertheless, and you have to fight for it. You don't want the housing market to crash, and that is you don't want the housing market to keep inflating, right? At that moment, you do not, because it brought you pain. If people keeps justified, for example, the adulthood will constantly be suffering. At that moment, I think it's fair for us to say we do not want any timeline. We want to say, hey, you have to. The opposing narrative is you deserve to be happy at any point in your time, and at any pain, this and any pain that disrupts that should be opposed, and that is why we oppose the narratives.
Thank you for that. Calling upon the leader of opposition. Here.
Okay, just asking. For calm in this room, apakah akan timing? Because I think barusan agak overtime. I might be wrong. My timer might be wrong. Tapi ya udah, I'll time myself.
Vin, speaking ordermu ketukar nggak sih di chat?
Salah ya? Oh iya.
Oh iya, maaf ya. Aduh.
Oh ya, so to clarify, leader of opposition itu hampir Dino. Deputy leader belum Dino.
Loh, tapi Kevin juga belum Dino, Aska hampir Dino.
Aduh.
Hold on. Is that how it works? Okay. Okay. Um, I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. I do understand Andre's point, right? I think it's the idea that ideally pain shouldn't happen or it shouldn't be normalized. But I do think that we live in a world where sadly pain is eventually going to happen and pain is inherently going to happen. And I think the narrative that pushes for you to be able to understand the pain better, be able to internalize the pain better, and be able to move on from the pain better ought to be the better narrative to exist in this debate. One response to opening government. Let me explain to you why pain, regardless of narrative, normalizing the existence of it, will still exist in both sides of the house. A. Pain is an emotion that comes from the dissonance between expectations and reality. You feel hurt your girlfriend breaking up with you because you should have been the one to marry her. You feel hurt having to leave your parents because you think you should stay together. And you feel hurt when you fall down from the bike because you think that you should be able to ride the bike. But dissonance will always happen. Why? Because our society always operates under a communal standard and a communal pressure. It means that no certain interest of a single individual will be left dissonant from the society. It looks like there will always going to be a certain individual expectation that does not lie in line with the communal expectation. It means this existence of dissonance in every single individual. It means that every single individual is going to feel pain. So Ko Andre's explanation of you not having to pressure individuals to go through pain will one day still happen regardless of the narrative. If you should, regardless of the narrative saying that growing up is a painful experience or not. On the timing sensitive, I do think that at the end of the day, pain is going to happen. Opening government cannot excel in this debate if they do not explain why the non-existence of the narrative amplifies the non-existence of pain in which the benefit of opening government is able to accrue under that. One principle and two sub-principle may be practical because we're debating against justice, right? On the idea of not letting people consent to be born. You do not consent to be born and you do not want to live in this world, but you do end up living in this world. At the end of the day, as individuals, as parents, and as society who have forced you to be born because society forces people to actually procreate and parents do partake in the procreation of humankind, they ought to give you a mechanism on how to handle the sufferings of life in which preparing an individual that's saying that, hey, growing up is going to be a painful experience. This is how you're going to handle it, ought to be the best narrative because you prepare an individual who never consented to be put in this situation. Why does this matter? Because there are two types of people. People who are born and regret being born, and people who are born and okay with being born. Inherently, these people who are not happy will function regardless of the narrative, right? But the idea of providing an individual an opt-out mechanism from processing pain wrongly only exists in opposition. Therefore, under opposition, you ought to give an opt-out mechanism or at worst mitigation system to reduce the amount of pain for individuals who regret at the end of the day being born. On to my arguments on why knowing that pain will come is a better system or a better narrative to exist. 3 points. First, in on preparation. Second, internalization. Third, on moving on from pain. Why is preparation better? Because now that the narrative does exist, that growing up is a painful experience, there are more discussion and more nuances into it. It looks like parents saying to you that, hey, you might be bullied in school, but you can still talk to us. It looks like on how you are encouraged to go to a psychologist or go to a psychiatrist because pain is something that is normal because growing up, you're definitely going to feel pain. You do not need to feel alienated if you do feel pain, and you need to process this feeling of pain. Why is this better? Because most likely pain manifests when the narrative doesn't exist. It looks like individual not expecting pain to be there and then pain suddenly being there. But what is the bad harm of pain suddenly being there and you not being prepared to actually experience this amount of pain? It looks like you manifesting this into blaming other people for this amount of pain, you not accepting that pain is actually there, you not internalizing what are the factors that caused you the pain, which means that your inherent rationale on handling the pain becomes irrational because you do not expect it coming, because you do not know how to prepare for this. This looks like you not talking to other people because you're afraid that other people will see you as weak when you experience pain. This looks like you not trying to understand where the source of pain is because you think that the pain is inherently irrational and you should just ignore the pain existing. Once you prepare individuals saying that growing up is a painful experience, you introduce nuances on how you experience pain, on how you will process this. But secondly, on the internalization, right? You know pain will happen. When it does happen, you tend to normalize it, but not in a sense where you ignore it. You see it as a natural process of life and you try to internalize it better. Internalizing looks like accepting that the world is unfair, but you can't do anything. It looks like not irrationally blaming people. Two pieces. This has a layer of agency, right? Because emotions inherently strip you the agency that you need to make rational and informed decisions, because emotion is the prerequisite of decision making. This means if you are not well prepared for this painful experience, or if you do not prepare individuals for this, you inherently take their ability to utilize their emotion well, inherently taking agency away from them. This means that they will manifest this pain into forms that they don't like to use, where emotions overtake their ability to think rational. Thank you, Chris. I got this from your speech. But B, a parallel example on how this works. This looks like doctors preparing individuals when you have a bad news of someone passing away, right? You make sure that their emotions are already taken control of. You ask them, are you okay? You should sit down. This looks like individuals allowing individuals with mental illness to not partake into law system because you know that their emotions will cloud their rational, right? It means that there is precedence for you to prioritize emotional capabilities of an individual to make rational decision, and that is seen as a benefit and that is seen as a good thing as long as this works in our side of the house. But lastly, on moving on from pain, I do think that moving on from pain is probably the most important tipping point in this debate, because the harms of pain is magnified with time and how long you are in pain. I do think that the harms of pain of losing someone, of breaking up, is not as big if you are able to internalize that pain and move on after a few months, compared to if you do not know why your ex broke up with you because they just said it under one text saying that, hey, I'm bored with this relationship. And you spent 4 years trying to figure out where you did wrong. Why were you so boring for that person? Why are you not able to find love in another person in itself? This means that the internal rationalization of an individual, being able to internalize pain, being able to accept that pain is something that is normal, and being able to find the source of pain and being able to live with that pain, is the prerequisite of moving on. It means that individuals in our side of the house with the narrative will have more incentive to move on. It means that individual in our side of the house gets the big harm or gets comparatively less harm from pain existing in our side of the house. Proud to oppose.
Okay, thank you so much for that speech. Calling upon the Deputy Prime Minister, here.
Check, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, POI, do it through chat. I'll take one from closing. If there's none, then opening. You can refer to me as government. Oh wait, DPM, no specific persons. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Judge, I want you to reread the motion. It's stated as growing up should be painful, not growing up will be painful. This directly cancels all of opposition contribution, because even if pain will happen regardless, the question then becomes, why should individuals go out of their way to make sure that their growing up will always be painful? When the narrative exists to instead normalize and justify individuals experiencing their personal pain and not moving on because they want to hold on to that pain, we proudly stand as OG. One independent rebuttal then. They told you that the narrative is needed to be a coping mechanism. But several responses. Firstly, how? Notice, Judge, LL never provided an elaboration. How will individuals most likely relate to the narrative and pain, and why is that in fact a good thing? Because not everyone has a coping mechanism. Not everyone will suddenly internalize the pain and everything will be a good scenario like what LL tried to tell you. It is way too utopic. We instead tell you, when you tell individuals that growing up should be painful, then why should they move on? Because you tell them that it is something natural in life and you should hold on to that pain in growing up. But comparatively to status quo right now, most likely under OG, without the narrative, we go through pain just as it is, but eventually we will get over it because that's how life goes on. We don't linger on to the pain because we believe that it is not something that is obligated in growing up, and we believe that we should go through with it until the end of time. So moving on then, 3 contributions I'm going to bring in my speech. Firstly, how will this prepare children for the future? This directly preempts opposition's biggest concern. We think that there already exist several mechanisms in status quo to prepare children, for example, whereas they go to school, taking up internship whatsoever. We then don't see the urgency why opposition need to go out of their way to give children a painful experience to remember, i.e. your parents kicking you out of your house, for example, to adultify your experience as a children. This is instead principally unjustified, right? Because anyone in society has the moral obligation to protect children until they are able to be an independent adult, not you trying to go out of your way to make sure that your children went through the painful experience as a method of growing up, especially as the family or parents of the children. You are the only one who brought the children into this world, so you have no right to purposefully make children suffer under the name of life experience. If anything, we think that children will experience life either way, right? Because it has its ups and downs. So it diminishes any urgency for narrative under side opposition. But even if in our worst scenario, for example, because we tell you that you shouldn't grow up in pain, whereas like, for example, children will not be accustomed or like whatsoever it is opposition try to tell you about pain, at the very least under us at the house, if children were to fail, if children were to struggle with pain whatsoever, we think that they still have parents as a safety net. Parents wouldn't normalize and try to justify the children's suffering. They will try to cope and help the children to mitigate through the suffering. Second contribution then, how will children cope with growing up? If you already tell children from the beginning that life will always be full of misery and painful experiences, the question then becomes, why would children want to continue living anyways under yours at the house? Notice, Judge, that opposition is not providing the children a reason to look forward to life. You're just literally canceling out any reason they have. This is harmful under 2 reasons. Because firstly, it erases any hope for a better future for children. The impact then becomes, children is more prone to giving up on something, whether it be pursuing further education or personal relationship, because in their mind, they think that they need to suffer, and that can only be achieved when you put yourself through the suffering of hell. Second impact then, children become scared of growing up under yours at the house because there's nothing to look forward to. You will always grow up in painful experience. That is what opposition try to tell you. So instead, you disincentivize children to opt into any adult-like activities, like getting a job, or how children are more prone to running away from their responsibilities under yours at the house. Why? It's easy because children is afraid of growing up. If you, for example, give them responsibilities, they might assume that, oh, they're officially becoming an adult. You are officially growing up, and that's where your hell starts from now. This also further takes down opposition's idea on preparing children because it becomes counterproductive. Children becomes more rebellious because they are afraid of growing up. They don't want to grow up. The impact from this is 2 things then. Firstly, on children's mental well-being. Under our positions of the house, they have a constant fear of growing up. They become too overwhelmed by the narrative to actually focus on what matters right now in life, which is enjoying in the heat of the moment. We concede life is not gonna be always sunshine and rainbows, for example. But at the very least, there's little things in life that makes you happy. For example, your tukang bakso comes into your house. At the very least, you can buy the bakso and be happy with and enjoy your lunch, for example, right? That little thing in life is what makes life even more enjoyable. We think it's extremely important to note that growing up shouldn't be categorized and standardized to painful experiences only. There is the pros and cons of it, and it should not be continued under the narrative under side opposition. Secondly, then, we think that for children who have already accepted the narrative and their fate under side opposition, they have pretty much given up on life. What do I mean? For children who struggle, for example, from the littlest things like failing school to being literally depressed, you wouldn't seek help under side opposition. Why? They don't try to confide with their parents. They don't try to seek a therapist. Why? Because under side opposition, they see pain as something necessary in growing up. They need that pain, and they will not try to remove it all of a sudden, right? And that cancels out also opposition's idea about children seeking help and coping mechanism. But before that, POI from closing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Opening.
I do think that your ability to experience good experiences need to come from the idea that you are able to experience potential pain. You makan bakso is only because in the future you know you will not makan bakso. But if there is no image that you will not makan bakso in the future, you do not appreciate makan bakso.
So then we don't understand why you need to go through pain to experience happiness. Regardless, life will have its ups and downs. We don't understand why the idea of experiencing pain is necessary. Because even if you don't believe in pain, you will still go through it. Even if you don't believe in happiness, there is still some points of it in life. And there's exactly the issue. We don't care, for example, like people don't necessarily care whether or not tukang bakso will come. If tukang bakso doesn't come, you can find another tukang bakso, right? So yeah, third contribution then. Children's happiness in childhood. We want to rebuild back from my PM because OG believe that you shouldn't put a timeline or an expiration date on someone's life or on how or on when they will ever experience happiness again. It instead becomes harmful when it creates a possible effect on the side opposition, where you are most likely to self-sabotage yourself in life. When something could have been a very happy and enjoyable moment, you overthink the narrative and eventually fail that state happiness. For example, you hang out with your friends, but in the midst of it, you realize that eventually that friendship is going to be a painful experience for you. Maybe they will leave you, or maybe they will betray you. That thought itself already cancels out the happiness you can get as an individual. All sense of happiness becomes very limited on the side opposition. The conclusion within this debate is on the principle. Why? Two things. Firstly, it is extremely unjustified for the narrative to exist and still weigh other people's chances at being happy. Just because life won't be bad doesn't mean it always needs to be bad, and the narrative doesn't need to exist to constantly remind you through it. Secondly, no matter what practical benefit you can get on a side opposition best case scenario, this debate is on a principle, on the purpose of life. Is it to live life in a is it to live life in full of misery or enjoy the little things in life that makes you happy? We concede life won't always be full of sunshine and rainbows, but it should not be generalized as a forever storm for individuals. Hence why we're very proud to propose.
Okay, thank you for that speech. Before moving on to Deputy Leader of Opposition, I think the panel needs to go to the toilet because Matthew just chat me. So yeah, 1 or 2 minutes lah. 1 minute sih. Jangan lama-lama, Matt. Oke, katanya Matthew udah balik, so ya DLO boleh continue.
Am I audible and supposed to be feasible?
Yes, you are, Bob.
Okay. Feel I unmute yourself. Maybe I'll take one, maybe I won't. Who knows? Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. I know joining DIPO Open is going to be painful as fuck, like the action that the tap did to me in this chamber. The fact that I know it's going to be painful, but I still do it anyway, is because I know in order for myself to be prepared for NSCC next week, I have to suffer, and whatever experience is going to be painful, and that is how I learn. I know it's going to be painful, but that's good rather than expecting DIPO Open to be filled with bad debaters and that I'm going to win and suddenly meeting these dinos. Simple example, 2 issues. Firstly, about legitimacy of pain. Secondly, how this affects individuals inherently. But first, 1 point of framing. I think this is simple. Just because you have a painful experience, that does not mean that there is no happiness at all, because that's truly uncharitable to begin with. Because opening opposition will say that happiness can still exist, but growing up, it will be filled with painful experience, like breaking up with your partner, like stress to study and failing competition. But that's not limited to it, because that's not even what motion as in the very first place. So let's just frame out all OG cases to begin with. First issue then, the legitimacy of pain. Firstly, they talk about timeline, but I don't think it's about timeline anyway. I think it's about the realistic idea what the world revolves, and the world is shit and means, and that is the truth, and that's what we want to defend and start opening oppositions. Firstly, few rebuttals. What they talk is we don't want pain to be justified at all. About pain as part of ABC, for example, 3 simple response. Firstly, panel. We're not saying that everyone deserves to feel pain, but the world is cruel, the world is mean, and you cannot change that at all. Second, I can easily say that this is too idealistic. Pain is inevitable to begin with, pain is normal, and that is when you can feel better. If you feel that 1,000 other kids cannot also afford that Power Ranger robot, at least under our side, when you feel pain, you know that you're not alone, and you know that other people are also struggling and suffering to go through that. But thirdly, but even if pain is not justified, no one like to feel that pain, but compared is that when you say pain is not justified, when you get pain on your side, you're shocked and you don't know how to act, and you feel that it's inherently unfair and you want to give up. When you expect that pain, you will not did not get that pain, and it's good. If you don't feel that pain, it's good. You feel at ease, but at least when you do feel that pain, you know how to handle it better because you're not shocked because of that pain at all under our side of the house. Second, they talk about becoming a functioning adult from someone that actually becomes an obligation for society to protect. Two things. Firstly, I think even that in and of itself is going to be painful. Having to adapt will have many struggles, and that is in self painful. Being in a new environment is literally painful. Me moving out to a new school with different type of people that literally took me to different type of view is inherently painful. So if you want to defend the narrative, that is also painful. But second, they talk about you deserve to be happy. Few response. Firstly, I think everyone deserves to be happy. And I'm going to use Justin Matter about happiness anyway. Even if you have multiple different hardship in your life and multiple different painful experience, pain is still achievable because of two ways. Firstly, I think pain is easily reachable and you can get it from really, really small, simple thing. Like, for example, seeing a cute puppy on your TikTok or seeing how beautiful the sunset is today or having a small talk with your family. But second, pain is also unpredictable. This means that even if you have 100,000 bad things happening through your day in that specific moment, when you go to sleep, you actually found a good book that helps you to sleep a lot better. When you have a good chat with your boyfriend and you video call your mother abroad, for example, it can overcome those badness and those shittiness that happened beforehand, because that's just how happiness works. It's not something that is inherently arithmetic to begin with, right? But how do we win this clash, right? I think firstly, we talked to that it's not about the pain needs to be deserving to individuals, but how you want pain to be realistically seen to individuals and how we want individuals to exactly be prepared and to actually understand that pain is inherently inevitable and to handle it better in the long term. Second issue then, talking about how this affects individuals. Firstly, they talk about parents have the obligation to prepare their kids and say the exact truth, right? I think clashing to Yvonne points about obligations of parents, there's two things. Firstly, I think you have the obligation to prepare your kids and you're obliged to the idea that the world is mean. Only opening you'll say you deserve happiness and pain is something you should not meet at all, and that is purely a lie, and it's just principally wrong for you as parents to tell all that shitty lie things to your kids. Secondly, my dad told me that growing up will be shit and people are corrupt, government are fucking corrupt, and etc. But that's what prepared me in the future to face government later on, to make sure that I can handle it better. Secondly, they talk about children will run away and not get a job, for example. That's from DPM, right? Firstly, this is two worst case. If you don't continue your life, it's either you live or you die, for example. And getting a job is a survivability mechanism that each individual do have in the current status quo. It is something that you have to have anyway. And anyway, I just don't think that people will suddenly not opt into jobs or not opt into responsibility, for example, just because they're scared. Leads to my next point. I'm going to flip this. How this will actually give more agency for individuals when they actually survive through that harmful experience, for example, right? 2 points. Firstly, when you go through pain, which you most likely will because of survivability mechanisms of human being, right? I think you'll be much more fulfilled under our side of the house when you know that, oh, this life is shitty, but I can still survive it, that I can still go through life and I can still become a well-being adult, for example, right? Andre cannot afford that or Ranger robot or something, but no, he's famous. He's a famous debater, a famous tabber, and I'm so proud of him, right? You appreciate yourself more because you know you actually go through all the harmful childhood, and now you're actually someone that is actually well known and someone that is successful. You respect yourself even more because you just get out of that harmful experience to begin with. But secondly, I think when you move out of a shitty relationship like me, it's fine because I appreciate myself even more and I'm proud of surviving, and that self-fulfillment is exclusive inside opening oppositions. But last point is about this will create fear growing up. I think there's 5 structural reasons why it won't happen, at least in opening oppositions. 5 things, right? Firstly, I think we can easily flip this panel. If everyone feared, they're gonna grow up, and it's communal struggle that all people in society actually experience. And this is when people is going to talk about it even more, and when you feel comfortable talking about it. Second, when you know that you're all going through struggle together, you're more likely to share that with other people. You have that sense of relatability and similarity with other people that you actually know. But thirdly, I think in the world of proposition, you think pain should not be felt, and you should always be happy on your side. When you feel pain, you don't know who to talk to because you feel that, oh, you're literally just alone and you're the only one that experienced that pain, because pain should not be justified or should not be felt by human being, for example. But for example, when you talk to other debaters and with debate stuff, you feel that it's a struggle to be just and kind, right? But you don't talk about it to your friends at school because they don't feel the same shit. And this is what is exclusive with that opening oppositions. When you make it a communal struggle, you're more likely to talk about it to your friends and to actually share that struggle and have the relatability factors and feel at ease that you are actually not alone. Fourthly, the end goal is the struggle of growing up becomes something that some people or like everyone talk about and share experience with your friends, and you feel at ease when you know that other struggle and that other people struggle the same way as you are, and that is something that everyone feel. It is something that gives them the better problems of management of individuals. Panel, I want to imagine the world where everyone feel the same shit and everyone share that within each other, and we say that's inherently good. I want you to be invited in the world of opening oppositions when you actually understand how pain is inevitable, and the only way for you to go through that pain is for you to have that communal struggle and to go through that as a community and as a family, for example, proud to stand under opening opposition.
Thank you for that speech. Calling upon the member of government. Here.
Hello, can I be heard?
Yes, you can. You're audible.
Wait, just give me a couple seconds. POI through chat, I'm gonna take one from closing. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You know, if opening has fun, feel free to do that. Anyway, it's been a really fun competition so far. I might talk about some things that are quite sensitive for some people. I really don't mean to offend anyone. It's just for the purpose of the debate. The daily update. It's 6 a.m. I think no one's woken up yet. I don't really want to wake them up, so I'm not gonna speak for too loud. Okay, it's gonna be fun. Growing up or maturing is not limited to people turning 18. The debate really could have used some nuances that will make top half sound extremely uncomparative. Let me tell you that growing up is not a linear process, and it doesn't happen at the same time universally for everyone. I would argue that top half did not really do a good enough job contextualizing the narrative, i.e., although I agree that most people are going to be subjected to this narrative, or at least most people will be exposed to it somehow, most of them are really uncomparative, right? I like opening opposition was probably correct in pointing out that OG surface level unnuanced mechanism does not really work for everyone, because some people might want to see life in a positive way, some people might not. The question in this debate then, insofar as you like the epistemic access to that, is to decompose who exactly will be influenced by this narrative the most. I think people grow up at a rapidly different rate. And some people, with or without the narrative, are going to be forced to mature much sooner than other people who have the comfort of home and family. In these instances, the biggest delta of this debate is to these most vulnerable actors that will be the main extension from closing government. Anything else or other actors becomes extremely insignificant and trivial, because who really cares about the puppy eye kids going to school in Kambang? They probably survive with or without this narrative. The ones who need the most urgent solvency are the people that we're going to argue. Extension from closing government, I'm going to talk about who are we really talking about in this debate. As I mentioned, again, these are people who are forced to mature early, people for whom growing up was never an option, but a necessity. They're the most impacted actors. Who are they? We're talking about minorities, either sexual minority, gender, religious, ethnic minority. Life has always been hard for them. Social pressure and discrimination everywhere. They have to realize that the world is harsh before they even develop like the, you know, what do you call it? Like the cortex brain, whatever, the capacity for them to, you know, process all those information. Secondly, financially struggling individuals, especially the children, they're forced to opt into the workforce much earlier than others, having to juggle between school and work every day. Thirdly, orphans, people who never saw any parental figure, or children who just lost their parents in a very tragic situation that was unprecedented. So this debate is not even about being happy for 18 years old like OG, because for the most vulnerable actors, that experience and all 14 minutes of OG's contribution were irrelevant, because these people never even have 18 years of being happy to begin with. These actors have some things in common. One, they're forced to mature much earlier than others, and they're scared. They are not even legal to drink, but they're already working 40 hours a week. They have no figures to guide them. The illusion of growing up is very, very scary for them. They don't know what's facing them in the future. Two, and this is really important, the delivery of the narrative is crucial. Because unlike what Kevin said, like what Kevin said about people getting it from their parents might be true for the most people that OG argued, but for these specific individuals, they're not likely to get this narrative from their parents or nurturing figures who can deliver this narrative in a preparatory manner to prepare them for the future, but rather by their bosses, by their ignorant nurses at their orphanage, by the ethnic majority who tell them that it's okay, you deserve to feel pain because that's what everyone else is facing. So they're not likely to say that, you know, you might feel pain, but here are the ways that you can go over that. They're not likely to do that. Just because the delivery of the narrative is not going to be a linear process, people have received this narrative in widely different ways, and for the most vulnerable actors, they receive the narrative in the worst possible way possible. But thirdly, I'm going to flip the idea of opposition, because what opposition said was that, but they will be surprised when they feel pain. Like, especially not for these people, right? They grow up knowing that they will not have an easy life. And the last thing that you want to do is to confirm that kind of understanding from them. What that side of the house does is to tell them that it will always be painful from now on, that you will never get back the happiness or joy that you also never got to experience while you're little, because they are scared, right? The choice is either for them to die or to face a very dark future, a gaping dragon's mouth, that they have no other alternative, that they cannot control their movement because the wall is moving really quickly behind them. They need to quickly, opt into that kind of life. They feel numb because they feel like they have no more control over their lives. This is better than OG. Specifically, we contextualize that the impact is on these children. Already independently debate winning at this point, because this is a much more contextual and nuanced explanation on who actually gets impacted by this narrative. And mind you, in a narrative motion, you don't only talk about the biggest degree of benefit, but rather the most vulnerable individuals, because even if we do agree the narrative is mostly good for most people, but if some most vulnerable people are not impacted well by the narrative, we would consider the narrative to not be good. Life gets horrible for the most vulnerable actor, and that already, delivers the normative burden for the discourse of closest debate. Closing go. 2, 1. To fulfill the bias of a counterfactual, though, let's discuss why optimism is crucial. 3 ways. 2 ways. 1, self-exploration, because these children have to quickly learn to survive. But what they're deprived of is their ability to discover who they are, what they want to be, what is their purpose in this world. But with numbness and pessimistic perspective that they will be forced to develop as their defense mechanism, they're never going to be open for new exploration of themselves. They're not living, they're just surviving. They will never be able to discover what they really actually want. This is different from Asuka joining DIPO, because she had a choice not to do that. For these individuals, they don't have a choice but to do that to begin with. But secondly, we give a powerful counterbalance, because emotion is in a spectrum. The problem of expecting pain, especially for these people, is that they actively prevent themselves from feeling anything to begin with, because allowing yourself to feel opens up a chance for you to feel even worse. This beats Asuka's insufficient analysis of happiness too, because you don't want to think about a good book or feel good about it, because pain that you experience tomorrow might even be worse. And this is the prerequisite for you to escape that cycle of hell that I think both top halves sort of talked about, because they sort of just assume that these individuals will be able to. Sorry.
My teammate is disconnected. Could you pause the debate?
Okay, sure. Hello? Is it good? Is it good? Elgar, are you here? Okay. Okay. Okay, I'm just gonna continue. This will reduce the dramatic effect a bit, but I hope we can act as if that break didn't happen. Okay, let's go. I'm gonna continue. I have 40 more seconds. Okay. And therefore, the case of closing government is logically prior to top half because we are the ones who actually tell you the prerequisite of these people to be able to not only survive, but get over the experiences. Panels, in the end, the biggest delta of this debate is in the final seconds before they close their eyes, before they sleep every night, and what goes on in their heads when they think about tomorrow. Sometimes a thought of what tomorrow might be is the difference between life and death. For these people, in all instances, we choose life. Affirm.
Thank you so much for that speech. Calling upon the member of opposition here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Oke, sorry banget ya guys. Jadi kayak my laptop stuck. Alright. Okay. Let me just grab a new timer. Okay.
Bentar, sorry. This time kayaknya Adam yang wait. Adam ada. Oh, oke. Karena WA-nya nggak delivered. Oke, aman.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I think I have to say that whatever I said is not reflective to my values. It's just for the debate. And I'm not sure if this is going to be equity violating, but I hope it's not because it's just intellectual debate. If it is, I guess I'm sorry. Okay. I'm going to start my speech in 3, 2, 1. This debate shouldn't be a pity party of who is necessarily has the most traumatic experience for individuals when they are young. Not that that is wrong, but I think this debate should be a celebratory of how we are able to overcome our pain as an individual going through the tribulations of puberty, the tribulations of moving on after you are able to overcome buying a new house, for example. You're able to get your first job, accepted in a college, even though it's not your top 1 college, for example. We think it's conceivable from all sides that growing up is painful, right? The question then needs to be specifying and making the debate clear on what does pain in growing up means. What do we mean it look like? It's definitely not bullying. It's not discrimination. It's not racism or sexism, because those are pain you experience regardless of whether you are growing up or not. It's going to happen structurally. So if all golf wants to debate in a world where life is painful, then the motion should have just been, this house feels that life is painful. But it's not. The key here is growing up, right? Specific pains that you experience when you are moving on from one aspect of a life to another. Puberty, rejection letter from your top college, first ever heartbreak, discovering your sexuality, even though it's icky and disgusting, for example, puberty and getting to know your body all over again. It's a narrative that, you know, at the end of the day, when you move on from one life to another, it's inherently painful. Being sad throughout your life, like what opening is talking about, and I think to a certain extent CG as well, is mental illness, for example, in which your brain is not wired to process events and emotions well. It's not growing pain. It's pain that individuals experience in general that is not specific to moving on. So then the pain should be why we should picturize when you want to move on from one aspect to another aspect. Why then that will have to be painful, that will have to be uncomfortable, but that's okay, because that is the right step for growth, and that's what we inherently want to push to win in this debate. One, I think the debate has been pretty, the impacts in this debate has been minuscule in terms of individuals that are only, for example, expected to internalize this motion in a way, in this narrative in a way that's extremely harmful, like what CG is trying to portray. I have no discrimination, for example. I'm not unsympathetic towards individuals who have it hard. But I think narratives should be judged not whether on it directly impacts those who are inherently marginalized, because there will be unique cases in which individuals are going to see that narrative horribly because of specific trauma that they have, but we're not going to cater to not have a narrative to support everyone just because one person, for example, has a trauma regarding specific, very specific type of trauma, right? We're going to ensure that the aggregate is good. So this is why CG should work, because CG is not able to see this debate in an aggregate of what net good looks like only to one specific harm, and no comparison as to why then all the other people should be harmed. First argument, right? Why incentivizes people to actually try to as many things as possible and discover themselves more when life is painful. When individuals are injected with the idea that life and growing up is happy and all flowers, it makes individuals afraid to experiment. Two reasons. One, because happiness is usually singular and defined by those in power when you are growing up in all stages. This means individuals who are socially adept, who are rich, who are very much have power to shift what the image looks like. The cool kids who define being happiness as successful. Why does this happen? Because the portrayal of happiness is achieved through its marriage with capitalism, and that you have to be rich, the most productive, the most successful. Happens through marketing campaigns that picturizes women smiling after they just got a new Hermes bag. Men, their first Tesla. The image of happiness has always been construed as successful. This is why it's bad then, and there is a huge disconnect between individuals and happiness, because individuals in a capitalistic system like me most likely want to achieve and strive to be as powerful as possible, as rich as possible, because that's the only way they're able to be happy. But why then it's better when we say that growing up is actually not happy, it's actually pain? Because at least the disconnect happens smaller, in which like people experience pain in a way that is not singular, because capitalism doesn't like to talk about pain. It's an open space in which the structure doesn't actually communicate what it means to be in pain, because there's no marketing campaign about it. There's no individuals that try to talk about pain. But what happens is that you are able to own the pain that happens specifically in your life to be your own. This looks like when your parents actually do not like you and prefer your brother, for example, over yourself. Or maybe when you constantly you and your lovers because you constantly go through a cheating phase, for example. What this does is that we celebrate individuals and their specific pain, knowing that individuals go through very different types and experience of pain. It allows individuals to actually go through life, understand that everyone is different, but that's okay. Because at least on our end, there is no big overbearing narrative that forces individuals to feel something they don't. But most importantly, they don't have to strive to join and feel like they don't own their experience because they always try to relate to those who are most likely in power. This ensures that even if we want to engage to CG with a privileged idea, we cater those who are underprivileged because we at least allow them to have ownership towards their life and their lived experience. This is principally important and takes out any opening because owned experience and leadership ensures that when you get over it through one way or another, you're able to necessarily see that, that was painful, but I got through it. This mechanizes the point that OO wants to bring about resilience, because at least on our side, we told you that the lived experience and importance of it ensures, after 6, it ensures that individuals are able to go through life not only equipped with resilient skill, but proud in the experience that they got through, knowing that they're able to necessarily fight their way through. This ensures that they have confidence in ensuring that in the future they're able to do it. But second, it allows individuals to actually not be okay when they're cringy or when they're not cool. They're able to escape the stigma of having to be a corporate person or a top-notch lawyer or be a footballer, for example, and they're not able to do English debate. They're able to necessarily join, I don't know, sepak takraw, whatever. They're able to expand because they understand that, okay, life is painful anyway, might as well I do whatever I want and be fucking YOLO, for example. In golf, they're so obsessed with trying to be happy, fighting whatever it is that generally makes the most happiest person happy, following them in order to achieve that. On our end, we say that individuals are liberated from the confines of fake happiness that is going to be pushed by a narrative that is out of the individual's control. On our side, individuals are happier, at least comparatively on golf. Only rich and powerful people are happy.
Okay, calling upon the government. Wave your hair.
Check, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. Give me a second to set up my camera. Okay, I'm going to begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Sorry banget. POI through verbal interruption aja. I also want to give trigger warning. I'm going to talk about various degrees of hardship happening to children, gender-based violence, abuse. I apologize in advance for any distress caused. Please understand that I make these points with full empathy to the actors in question, and that these are necessary elements of the issue to consider. Okay, beginning my speech in 3, 2, 1. We ask you to place yourselves in the shoes of an orphan who has never experienced the warm, encouraging hand of a parent and must convince themselves that life has better things in store for them than the blood painting their souls as they wander through storefronts in the driving rain. We ask you to place yourselves in the apron of a 14-year-old baker who must perform the bulk of the duties in the family bakery in the place of her drunkard father and wheelchair-bound mother. We ask you to place yourselves in the sundress of an 8-year-old realizing for the first time that the streets, which is the veritable playground for boys her age, is instead a hostile and unknown land where 50-year-old lecturers can undress her with their eyes, grab their own genitals as she passes down the street, and there's nothing she can do about it. We say that reality is extremely harsh and that it forces vast swaths of our youth to grow up sooner than they should. This pain is directly attached to the process of growing up, because growing up means that the process of assuming responsibilities which you once didn't, of considering things like survival, things like living another day, which no child should have the burden to consider. We say that, therefore, the claim coming from opposing opposition that we have to separate the pain that is dealt to you through bad things that you experience in your life and the pain of growing up are not one and the same, because in vast majority of cases, they are. They come from the shock of realizing that the world is a gaping open maw of a dragon and you have to walk there whether you like it or not. In the presence of such pervasive hopelessness, it is important that individuals are able to hope. hope, that they are able to contend with the reality that would otherwise cripple them by resorting to the thought that there are better days ahead, that there are still good people in the world, that growing up is a transformative experience which continuously equips you with the tools needed to better your life, to better the conditions you find yourself in, that growing up is not painful, it is a process of liberation, and it is a process of instilling hope. We think that this ability to hope is the single most effective tool with which an individual can absorb the force of reality weighing down on them, and we must therefore preserve it at all costs. Two things broadly. First, let's engage to the broader content coming from opposition bench. The claim coming from closing opposition is that the winning team needs to engage in the scale debate who can have the most impact towards the most amount of people. We agree in that the scale debate is important, but we need you to understand that this is not a numerical consideration of who can affect the most amounts of people in general, because we say that this narrative, like most other narratives, have negligible impact towards a vast swath of society who have access to healthy support networks, who have access to other forms of narrative that are distilled, for example, by the education system that allows you to be more hopeful about your chances in life, even if reality is looking quite bleak, for example. What we need to consider are people who operate outside of these other narratives that are available to other people, for example. These are people like orphans whose only source of gaining narrative are exactly the environment surrounding them, rather than any concentrated actor that would exist for the vast majority of society, right? So in that case, we say that the scale debate needs to happen in that how can we save those lives, for example? How can we create the most amount of survivability for people who are at the very edge of that precipice, who are at the very edge of dying, for example, from the sheer desperation that they feel for their daily condition. And because of that reason, we are the team that creates the most impact. So let's talk about opposition case broadly, right? First, I will talk about dissonance and I will talk about resilience, engaging to OO and CO's derivative content on resilience later on, right? So OO tells you that pain comes from dissonance between expectation and reality. We disagree. We think that experiences can prescribe with a value of good and bad for an individual, and whether they feel pain is dependent solely on that value of good and bad. When I went to WUDC, fully knowing that I won't be able to do justice to the level of investment my coaches and institutions placed in me, I am still pained when my expectation becomes reality. I am still pained by the knowledge that I have disappointed the people I wanted to make proud the most. What that means in the context of this debate is that children can expect every single painful experience that they have in their life and still be crippled by the sheer weight of their burdens forced upon them far too soon. When the streetier expects to be raped and their fear becomes reality, they do not become immune to the pain of having their body violated and their dignity trampled. The pain remains irrespective of your expectation, and the process of internalizing does not become better. And we think that this is a direct engagement as well to the resilience content coming from both opposition benches, right? Even if we were to accept that you can have a smoother experience of internalizing that pain, why is it still bad? We say that internalization by definition means that you are processing the pain and trauma that you experience in the aftermath of receiving that trauma. That means in order for you to get to the stage where you internalize, you must first absorb the full brunt of that trauma, ladies and gentlemen. Before then you are able to process, compartmentalize the trauma for some semblance of meaning from the ashes that remain. Given this context, I think that the internalization of pain can only be a benefit insofar as the individual's limit of pain is not exceeded when they absorb that pain wholesale. No, thank you. When they don't mitigate the amount of pain they receive with a healthy dose of hope, which you have under closing government. I think in the best case scenario, that means that they experience an excruciating pain at the outset, completely unmitigated by hope, and may be able to derive some sort of meaning in the aftermath. But in the worst, and we argue most prevailing case for people who are most vulnerable, it may be the case that the initial state of absorbing the shock of that pain may not be a survivable event. When you have your loved ones ripped away from you and you are told that you have to suck it up, that's just how reality is. When you have your body violated and you are told that this is just the world that you have to deal with, maybe people will not see the point of living another day just to have that suffering be repeated against them. Given this context, I think it's important for us to be able to create hope so that the pain does not get to that level and people are able to see a better thing happening in the future, right? And we provide this to you on the comparative and the government side. We allow the children who are most vulnerable and most affected by these narratives to grow up with some semblance of a solve to the difficult circumstances that they find themselves in, which helps in them absorbing that initial shock of pain rather than being forced to pick up the pieces in the aftermath, right? right? We give them a means of surviving just another day, to see what lies around the bend, ladies and gentlemen, to hold out hope that life will pick up and get better. We think that's the single most important contribution in the debate, because we cater to those who are most marginalized, for whom this kind of narrative surrounding growing up plays the role of the Grim Reaper. We think that oftentimes children are forced to grow up before their time, and the only thing that we can do as a society that has failed them to create safety nets for this marginalized actor is to ensure that they are able to access the narrative that things can get better. They are able to access the narrative that hope exists, and you are completely deconstructing that under opposition side. And for that reason, we are so proud to propose.
Thank you so much for that. Calling upon the last speaker in this round, Opposition Whip, you're here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Gender pronouns, he or they, or you can also refer to me as my speaking position as opposition whip. POI preference, unmute. If by at any point I'm lagging, please just interrupt my speech. Trigger warning, I'll be discussing about several depressing things. This is just for the sake of debate. CG failed to win this debate the moment that they failed to provide what's going to be the counter alternative on the other side of the house. Because the absence of the narrative that growing up should be a painful experience, on the other side of the house, the narrative would be growing up would be a pleasure experience, would be a transformative experience. And CO would explain to you why the government bench is going to be much worse. Even if CG cannot win just simply explaining that we're going to be bad, but they need to explain why they're going to be better, and that's why they failed, right? I'm going to talk about 5 different stages of life. First, I'm going to talk about the preparation. Second, I'm going to talk about foundation. Third, I'm going to talk about learning. Fourth, I'm going to talk about empathy. And lastly, I'm going to talk about appreciating happiness. But first, let's talk about preparation. This is important because opening house never mechanizes about what kind of preparation is going to take place. There are 3 things I'm going to talk about here. First is I want to tackle OG case regarding people would rebel, children would rebel. We think that children rebel because they want to look for attention because no one understands them and their pain. At our side of the house, one that there's a narrative that growing up should be a painful experience. We help parents to understand that their children are going through something difficult. They're going through puberty. They're going through the first rejection from top college and whatnot. And that's exactly why then parents would be more incentivized to try to understand their children. We think that the delta here is the parents who are actually at the first place is negligence and ignorance. At our side of the house, they would try to understand the children better. Hence why children would be less likely to rebel at our side of the house. But secondly, we think that we would fulfill opening up positions facing our explanation. This is why Albert's argument is important, because on our side of the house, the preparation looks like at our side, you experience as many things as possible. Yes, we understand that rejections and pain might be scary, but at our side of the house, there's a safety net for these children to experiment exactly because they have their parents, exactly because, for instance, some people, they have their support, they have like friends, or as simple as they're still young, they still have so much time they have still so much time, and therefore this crucial moment is for the moment for them to be able to shape their future to begin with, right? Therefore, the preparation looks like for them to try as many new things and try as many new hobbies as possible, try to debate, try to envy and whatnot, right? But thirdly, let's take about CG's pain and where children are afraid of growing up. This is very important because notice that the comparative advantage of the house is that the growing up would be a pleasure experience, the growing up would be a transformative experience. This is problematic in 3 different ways. First, this is problematic because it's such a false expectation to begin with, right? Yes, they are provide hope, but this hope is exactly going to be much worse for the other privileged people that they're talking about. Why is that so? Notice how poor children would looking at their rich friends by saying that, oh, my rich friends actually see getting their Power Ranger or like getting their MacBook or something like that. Exactly what these poor children would think is that, oh, life, and everyone keeps telling them that puberty and growing up should be pleasure, should be transformative, but they don't feel like it. So what they see is that they would see themselves entirely different and entirely unlucky. They would be much more desperate on their side of the house, right? At the outside of the house, at least we say that everyone is undergoing true pain, and that exactly they would be less. They would already set the expectations that everyone is exactly pain undergo the pain, right? But secondly, the positivity that the government's trying to do is the toxic positivity, right? It forces individuals to see that there's always going to be something, or there's this pain is nothing, that this pain is just only temporary and whatnot, that there's going to be transforming them into a better person and whatnot, right? Exactly, they would be less likely for them to be able to prepare them for the real, for more pain, because they keep dismissing pain in the first place, right? But lastly, the deaths of the house, the hope exactly would fuel these children's anger towards their parents, towards their caregivers, towards the society at large. Exactly, the deaths of the house, the children would grow up into someone that is exactly more detached from society, detached from help and whatnot, right? Because they feel like no one understands them at the deaths of the house. But secondly, let's talk about foundation of feelings. This is also important because it directly tackles to OG regarding children would not go to therapy and just would self-sabotage. At the outside of the house, we separate two things. First, separate the good parents and children. Good parents would guide the children to actually make sure they go to therapy or make sure like they assist them to validate their feelings. Good parents would try to listen to them and whatnot. But secondly, we understand that our parents who are absent. We understand that are bad parents. But at the outside of the house, the characterization is that children would be most likely to have like their social circumstances, they have friends and whatnot. And outside the house, we normalize these discourses, we normalize this conversation. Things outside the house, they realize that they would not be alone. Their side of the house would never process their pain. They would just dismiss it. They would just feel like, oh, if I share this, then I will be I'm different and whatnot. Therefore, in the house, they would not be validated. But thirdly, let's talk about learning from pain. This is important because opening opposition only talks about coping and moving on. We as CEO would talk to you about the net benefit outside the house, right? We think that exactly at the outside the house, the pain is ownable, right? And outside the house, you can wear it proudly once you go through pain, meaning that once you go through a rejection from a top university, you can say that, oh, this pain means that I'm actually celebrating that I'm actually growing up, for instance. Yes, this might hurt, and I understand that this is a very life-changing moment. But under our side of the house, you're able to understand that this at the outside the house, the happiness, the pleasure, it would not consign you to be full. It would not limit you from experimenting or finding who you are. You start to develop resilience on the our side of the house, right? But fourth, let's talk about empathy, right? But that empathy is important for 4 key reasons. Number one, exactly after they go through pain, and the narrative is that growing up is painful experience for everyone, you start to understand that everyone goes through it. It helps the marginalized groups that CG keeps talking about. And outside the house, the middle class people or higher class people will understand that poor children are going through the worst pain, and therefore they would help be empathy to help the poor children by giving up donations, for instance. And secondly, outside the house, you give these poor children time to process, or you give children to process. The moment they after went to puberty, after they went to a breakup, society will understand that, oh, this is a painful moment of every day. I've been through it as well. I will give time for them to process. But thirdly, you also make policies that support these women, that support these children growing up. For instance, you allow children to actually be more to explore, to cut their hair, or to cut their hairs, to dye their hairs and whatnot, because you understand that they're going through something that's painful, or you're going to something that is self-exploration, right? But lastly, you start to accept the flaws and mistakes of these children afterwards, after they go through pain, and they might do mistakes, or they might have like trauma and whatnot. You understand that it's because of their growing up to begin with. This is explosive the moment that you see that growing as a painful experience, because you start to relate to this kind of individuals to begin with. And the rest of the house, you make growing up simply as pleasure, as simply as it's not that pain is not experienced by everyone to begin with, right? But lastly, let's talk about happiness. We think that they also directly tackles to OG, because we think that happiness is portrayed by those in power, so that usually the narrative that portrays happiness is hijacked with capitalism. So we're talking about how happiness means that you have to buy fancy clothes. Happiness, you have to buy the newest iPhone. On the outside of the house, that growing up, when we are able to define your own growing up and outside the house, that growing up might not be as suitable as everyone else, that you might not have to follow the trend. You can be different, and it's okay, because growing up is indeed different and subjective for everyone. For all these reasons, really good.
Okay, thank you so much for that speech. Because this is a silent round, you guys can just